Hello, good morning. I'm a little bit, well, actually, it doesn't look as bad now. I had really bad bedhead this morning. It's like 2, and I slept in really late because I was really tired, and my sleep schedule has been thrown off. I haven't worked on this project in like maybe 2 weeks now because it just got really hard. And then I had a bunch of finals. Like I was working on my first like in-person final when I made my last video. And then I wanted to study for that final, finished, thought I'd take a week off for my project, and then I had a second in-person final um Thursday, so like 2 days ago. I was really nervous for that, so I didn't work on this project. And I was also lazy just because I it's just really hard right now. Like I don't feel like it. Like it's a lot of mental work and I just haven't been in the mood, but we have to power through because I don't feel like working on this anymore, so it has to be finished. One reason for my slight project depression is that this is just taking so long. I've been working on this for over a year and I wanted to even have this project done early. And I'm just like, it just keeps dragging and dragging and dragging on. And it's so complex and so difficult that I thought, like, okay, great. Like, I'm so far ahead. I already have my paper, like, pretty much written, my experiments planned, like, everything. And then there's like another bump. And I was really hoping to have this, like, already kind of like starting to be written up by the end of May. And who knows, maybe it'll still happen. But we're still here. And I'm like, it's due in August. I've never like I've always been someone to like I'll turn my paper in or my projects in like day of, it's due at 11:59. I'm submitting it at 11:58. And I was really proud of myself because I felt like this time I actually was like gonna be early and I might still be, but it's like it's not really as early as I thought right now. And it doesn't matter because it's months early, but it's like I feel like I've been working on this, no lie, like a year longer than the average student. Like everyone else in my program, we started in October. People started like getting into their projects by, I don't know, maybe like December. By like December, people were in projects and stuff. And then, okay, now they're gonna like, they helped out with somebody else's project. Now they're gonna write it up and they're gonna be done by August. Where it's like, I've been doing this myself since like 7 months before school started. So I was like, I wanted it to be done. And it's like, it's not done yet. And that's really annoying because it's like, I'm working like 7 times harder than anybody else in my program just to be done at the same time. So it's really annoying me. Like, it feels like if it's done early, it's like, oh yeah, you just got it out of the way. But it's like if I'm submitting it at the same time as everyone else, I literally just work like 1,000 times harder for no it's not for no reason because it's my project, so I wanted it to be done. But you get what I'm saying? It's like I feel like I'm just crawling up this big hill and it's like this massive thing. But anyways, I don't even want to deal with this. I'm just looking at it and it feels like I'm looking at a foreign language again, because I haven't looked at it in 2 weeks. So I was trying to see like an output of multiple different layers of like multiple different patterns. So I could see basically like, okay, because I was having some issues with it. So to sum it up, last time I realized that the sparsity was off, and then that was causing like one model showed the showed the effect that I wanted it to, but it was because something was off with how the sparsity was set up. And then the other model, like it completely wiped out the hallucinations and things that I was seeing at low acetylcholine. And I was like, wait, I don't want it to wipe them out because I want to talk about that. And it is realistic to low acetylcholine to have that impact. I was like, multiple different disorders that actually have hallucinations, amnesia, memory loss, confabulations also coincide with low acetylcholine. So I was like, it must be a good thing. I actually might write this down because I think my issue right now is kind of like a logic issue where I'm like, it's like, I feel like I'm getting tangled up in like this giant tangle. There's been so many different tangles in this project where it's like, it's really like internally abrasive. I don't know how to put it, but anyways, this is like a big mental tangle right now. Okay. Okay, we had one. So basically, I'm gonna call this this document is just gonna be called the tangle. Lowest name. It's good that this project has been internally like there's internal motivation to continue it and to finish it because obviously like I was impacted by dissociative amnesia, so I want to see this published and I want to see it do well because of that. Like that was the internal motivation because if not, bro, I'd be so done. Like I think that's what's really been driving me to work through some of like the tangles rather than just being like, well, it's good enough. The number one tangle, let's actually go back to my Claude. Every tangle comes with some completely new thing I have to learn how to think through. It's just a little bit beyond my scope, so I have to think through it slowly. Like this isn't okay. So I was trying to understand. I'm gonna see if I put it in my sub. I'm so lazy to open all of my different documents and different things. I think I wrote it in my notes app. Let's see. Okay, yes, this is the two. These were our two biases, okay? So I'm going to explain the issue here. So this bias, it's basically modulated by the amount of sparsity, by the level of sparsity. So it basically has this line, which I'll show you. Actually teaching somebody is one of the best ways apparently to learn, like retain information. And I think that my YouTube has like, it helps because it's like, let me teach it to you, right? Let me teach it to you. Basically, the reason that this is happening is the way my code is working is that it's modulating everything based on this right here. So sparsity equals blank, A equals sparsity. So A is going to be equal to whatever the sparsity level is at my project. I think I need to understand, like, I know what sparsity is, but like, I don't think that I fully know this. So I want to wrap my head around how the sparsity level is actually working and what's it changing. But basically this one, as you can see, it's the rule is getting changed because of this little A. And so it's actually taking everything and making it relative to the amount of sparsity in my model. So that's number one thing about it. However, the sparsity was at 0.2. The thing about that is that it's actually higher than would actually be biologically realistic. But that the reason that they did it like that though is because with the models, this is what I was learning, is that I learned this through like a lot has been through trial and error. Okay, so I started messing around with the sparsity here and seeing like, oh, okay, well that should like change this and this and that. But what I was seeing, and this was why I gave up again and just like threw my hands in the air, was just like, no, I don't care anymore. Was that actually when I was putting it too low, it was impacting like what was being encoded. And I was like, it's not supposed to be messing that up. So I asked like why. Let me see. When I just change the sparsity amount A in here, it distorts the closest encoded Y. So I put it in, like I changed it to 0.1, but let me see if I can show it. It's hard to see it here, but it was basically messing up what was getting encoded. And that goes like it doesn't the thing about it being what was messing up what was being encoded is that rather than that being getting changed in the weights, which is the thing that I'm actually wanting to discuss, it's just like it's almost as if you already like learned a messed up version of something versus something getting messed up on like a deeper level. So I was like, that's just not right. That's not what I'm looking for. So it was explaining to me. So closest encoded isn't showing you a distortion. It's showing that the recovered state is closer to a different encoded pattern than the one I was trying to recall. So it was like almost like it was supposed to be looking at pattern 1, but it was actually encoding pattern 2. So there was just like deeper issues after that point. I had to fix this, like the noise which is basically the almost like the new memory it's learning had to be changed. There's a lot going on. If this sounds really complex and like what's happening, that's how it feels for me. I'd feel confused. And like there's a lot going on here that I just like it's like whoa. Like it just keeps throwing things at me and I'm like, whoa. So then you can see I was confused. Can you explain what exactly is happening? So basically, there's so much. I'm sorry, this is the most confusing part of my whole project. I'm just like, what? Because it's actually getting into like the inner mechanics of the actual Hopfield network and stuff. So I'm like, it's beyond just like, okay, I'm just gonna like the neuroscience part. It's like you just study and you just learn it, but this part, it's like there's a lot of moving parts going on. So I'm very lost. I don't know if lost is the right word, but I just feel like out of my element by a lot. Same for neurons. The bias is the alarm threshold, and the average room temperature is a typical signal a neuron receives. So if it gets 0.2, 20% of neurons fire in a typical pattern. 0.5 means 50% of neurons fire in a typical pattern. So the number gets used to estimate the average input each neuron receives. My pattern at sparsity is 0.2. Only 10 out of 50 neurons are firing in any given pattern. So each neuron only gets on average a signal from those 10 firing neighbors. So the typical room temperature is low. I'm thinking that it wants to make sure that too many neurons don't fire. Sets the alarm threshold as if 25 neurons were typically firing, but only 10 actually are. The threshold is now 2. I wish that I had this in a book. I'm actually going to pull out my neural network book. I don't think that it's going to go into this at all. I think it's too complex for what my neural network book is about. But I am going to look through it. I just, for some reason, it's just not clicking that well. For reference, this is my book. I've shown it in other videos. Just Make Your Own Neural Network by Tariq Rashid. I need more books. That's like on the list. See, the thing is, like, once this project is done, I'm not going to stop learning. Like, I actually want to learn more. I want to make the neural network in this book. I want to learn, but it's just like until this is done, I have to be focused on this, you know? I need to find like a YouTube video or something like that explaining these biases. I don't know why it's not clicking for me. The test is designed so typically students typically score 20 out of 100. So you should pass students who score above 20. Instead, you pass the passing grade at 50. Almost nobody passes. I'm gonna ask in this metaphor about passing, why does nobody pass? I think the thing that's not clicking for me is that 50 is a bigger number than 20. So in my head, if that bias is higher, that should mean that it's like more, like it's bigger, so more should pass. Does that make sense? But it's like because that's what's like not very intuitive for me, where it's like it's higher, like that's a bigger number. Let's look at the actual math because maybe this is time to look at math. But you know what? When it comes to those numbers, what's happening here is that it's actually splitting this in half. Meanwhile, this, it's like almost like a fifth, you know? So I think this is time to get into math. Whatever this is, like this NP sum thing, we need to start looking at this as a unit. Okay, so NP sum, weights, axis, no, let's write this below, equals 1. This is like an item. Okay, this is an item in my head. Okay, the problem with the item in number 1 is that the item is getting like split, or not split, it's getting divided, but by less. So times 0.2, it's like splitting it by a fifth. Like let's say the item is like 10. If you multiply it by 0.2, this might be my math redemption arc. Okay. And then for 10, if you multiply it by 0.5. So 10 times 0.2, this is what's not very intuitive for me right now. Okay. I made this NP something is like an item and it's getting multiplied by these numbers. And in bias number one, it's getting multiplied by 0.2. So I had to double check. I was like, am I going insane? No, I wasn't. I was like, maybe I'm just that bad at math. What's not clicking for me is why, if the bias is a bigger number, why would it be harder to cross the threshold? Because that you would think that because the number was bigger, anything would be able to cross that threshold. Where if the number was smaller, it's like, oh, that's really hard. But with the way Claude is explaining it to me, it's like, okay, the test is designed so that students typically score 20 out of 100. You should pass students who score above a 20. If instead you set the passing grade at 50, almost nobody passes, even expected. So I guess this is the threshold for what needs to be, but the threshold is, you know what? Let's see how the bias is used. Let's see how the bias is used in my thing. Where does the bias go? Okay, we have the bias here. Wait, this is not the right thing. So we have the bias up here somewhere. This is the bias. I'm gonna ask it to explain a bias again. Oh wait, did it actually explain it though already? I think the other thing fueling my project depression recently has just been that like, sometimes it's like it's so much work where it's like, is this so much work for nothing? Is this work worth it? Is it worth the amount of effort that I'm putting in to have like literally like my hormones got thrown off, my body was like, I worked so hard on this and I'm like, was this worth it? It has to be though, right? Hard work is never not going to be worth it. I learned so much. I'm learning like this as well. A bias is a neuron's firing threshold, the minimum signal it needs to receive before it turns on. So the problem with this bias, I guess, so let's put it back down here, is that with this bias here, it needs to get a really big signal to turn on. So it needs to get a really big signal, whereas this one, the signal doesn't need to be that strong. Okay, so that's our issue. That was what was the difference between this and that. So first of all, let's think about this intuitively for a second. What was happening? Like, let's write down what was happening. What was our issue? At the lowest acetylcholine levels, basically what was happening is that the density was really high. And the thing is that a lot of neurons were active in the encoded pattern, and the bias was higher. So the neuron firing threshold needed to be higher to make neurons turn on. Is that right? Here's the other thing that's not clicking for me yet is that you would think, I would think, basically that higher, that more density would make it easier to cross that threshold. That doesn't mean that's like the truth. It's just like my assumptions right now that I'm trying to learn through each assumption that I would make and why that is wrong. So I would think that more density would make it easier to cross that threshold because more neurons are active. See, so I'm understanding something wrong probably. Okay, we're gonna learn more now. This is actually a good learning session. This is making me feel a lot better. Where's the signal coming from? Where is this signal coming from in the model itself? The signal is the recurrent input, the sum of contributions every other The sum of contributions from every other neuron in the network. You know what I think is going to be really interesting based on this? I was actually thinking my combo one isn't really going to give me like, it's not going to be that interesting that much, even though it's going to answer my question because I already have like conclusions from both parts of my model. So I already have a conclusion like, okay, I can already see everything about my pattern separation network and I can see like how that one works and why that one works and what doesn't work. And I'm going to have my other experiment, which is my recurrent excitation one, and it's going to have, I'm going to get information from that. So it's like, I'm not expecting the combination one to be that interesting. The only thing I think is going to be really interesting, actually, now that I'm reading that, is to see something like this. I think this will be very interesting to think about for people that get psychosis because of trauma. Is when the low acetylcholine is low and the recurrent excitation is high, what's going to happen? I think that one will be very interesting for sure. Like, I'm really curious to know what's going to happen with that, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. We need to get there first. So where's the signal coming from in the model? So my update function. The sum of contributions from every other neuron in the network. Let me trace exactly where it appears in your code. H equals NP dot. So this is the signal right here, apparently. The H is the signal. Let's write that down in my thing. It's computed as NP dot, and okay, which is a fancy way of writing weights IDX0. What is IDX? Neuron IDX looks at every other neuron in the network and sums up how strongly am I connected to that neuron times where it's currently firing. And many of its strongly connected neighbors are on, H is big. If they're off, H is small or negative. This is actually like, I don't know, this is probably my favorite learning session I've had so far in my project, or one of the top. This is so informative. I feel like the whole entire Hopfield network is just coming to life for me right now, and I'm understanding it all so much deeper. You see, I've learned through this project, and I'm someone who hates, like, when I was younger, I did not like making mistakes. My mistakes have been so informative. Like, every mistake has just been so chock full of like learning opportunities in this project and things to kind of unpack, or even just interesting solutions and like, oh, it wasn't a mistake, it was this. This has really been changing my relationship to mistakes a lot. It's been a really interesting internal process. So neuron IDX looks at every other neuron in the network and sums up how strongly am I connected to that neuron times, wait, how strongly am I connected to that neuron times whether it's currently firing. Let's see if we can see what that math is like. Does it say already? So the connections come from, the weight matrix was built in my encoding step. So for P and encoded patterns, the stamps each, stamps each stored pattern into the weights using Hebbian learning. After this, weights IJ is large and positive when neurons I and J tend to fire together. So what is H? When the network is currently in some state and you ask should neurons IDX fire? H answers the question by polling all the other neurons. So for each neighbor that's currently on, it asks, do you and I usually fire together? If yes, positive weight. And the neighbor adds support, yes, you should fire too. This is probably the place where you get the issue where it's like a bunch of them are just randomly like turning on at once. Like, oh, okay, all of a sudden the whole thing is lit up with ones for no reason. All those votes are added up to produce H. Did I already get that? Yes. Okay. So the comparison, then H is more than adjusted bias is the final decision. Do I have enough support from my firing neighbors to overcome my threshold. High H and low bias makes it easy to fire. And let's put this down here. Do I have enough support from my firing neighbors to overcome my threshold? So high H and low bias makes it easy to fire. Low H, few supportive neighbors means it's hard to fire. And then the bias is the bar that H has to clear. So I guess what's happening at the low acetylcholine, this is my guess, my first assumption, is low H, few supportive neighbors makes it hard to fire. That even if there are supportive neighbors, the bar is still too high to clear. The question becomes, though, why is that happening at low acetylcholine specifically? Why are the neighbors less supportive? Or is that not the issue? Say neuron 7 has a strong positive weight to neuron 22, a weak positive weight to neuron 18, a negative weight negative 0.1 to neuron 30, all other weights near 0. If the current network state has neuron 22 on, neuron 18 off, and neuron 30 on, you get 1, 0, -1 times 1, and the sum of a bunch of stuff, get 0.3. So then it checks, is 0.3 more than the bias? If yes, then the neuron turns on. If no, it stays off. So what's happening is that at low acetylcholine, the bias is below. That makes sense because the sparsity is at 0.2 in my network, but the actual bias is at 0.5. I don't understand why, though, that's happening when it's lower, but why are they higher? Right? So the question is still, though, how are they managing to cross when there's less density? You would think it would just mess it up from beginning to end, but it didn't. It messed it up in a way that made, wait, I'm actually going to write this down. This is what's confusing. So how are they managing to cross the threshold when there's less density? Even in the one that had like that high threshold, the upper acetylcholine amounts who that were less separated, or no, that were more separated, more densely coated, were able to pass that threshold in a way that's very similar to how acetylcholine works in a brain. So that's the confusing part, is like, yeah, that is what's happening. I mean, unless it's just completely off, but I'm like, it's very bizarre to have gotten literally what a low acetylcholine is meant to work like, but get me, it's like, why? And you would think that if there's less patterns, that like if there's less neurons firing, but that's going to go into how it relates to the noisy pattern, I think. So you see, it's a very complex one. I'm like, why? So the whole reason is that, you know what? I remember I was speaking to somebody recently about beginner's mind, which is a concept in Buddhism where it's like, I'm gonna look it up to show that an attitude of openness, eagerness, and lack of preconceptions when studying makes you actually sometimes go further by having a fresh perspective than people who go like who are super duper like they already know everything. And then I pair that with, at one point when I had, this is tangle number probably a million, But tangle number 2, off like the top of my head, I had another big tangle at one point, which I was like, why would the acetylcholine still be up after? And at that point, I was feeling the same frustration. And I had this video come up. I'm gonna see if I can find it. I'm gonna struggle to find it. I'm gonna try to put it in the comments below. I mentioned it in another video when I was dealing with this tangle, but it was like at the right moment. You know, sometimes you hear the right things at the right time, but it was like a little short of this female chemist called Frances H. Arnold. And she was saying in the video, she was like, sometimes the good thing about going into something as an amateur is that what was it she said? She was like, the essence of it was that sometimes like you do better when you don't feel like you know everything because you don't know what you don't know. I don't know if that's the best way to put it, but it's like you have no idea what you don't know, so your mind is just kind of open to doing all sorts of different and unique things. Where sometimes when you're like, you know too much, you are too close off, essentially. And I listened to that when I was going into like the second tangle of this project, and it helped me a lot. And essentially, I think that it's funny because this project, so many of the best parts of my project have been because I had zero clue what I was doing. So I would just make these mistakes. It's like if I knew what I was doing, it wouldn't have happened. So for example, that bias, I would have been like, oh yeah, the bias, like I'll just fix it so that it works. Where it's like I accidentally did that, where I set the bias like the bias was accidentally like too high or something. But then I was like, wait, but that is how low acetylcholine works though. So I just feel like I make a lot more mistakes and I have like more of these little moments where I'm just like, oh, what? Like something just came up that I have no clue. And then I have to kind of investigate further. So I think it's actually been kind of an interesting thing to do without having any kind of sense of I'm just like leading myself with absolutely no kind of knowledge of my own mistakes sometimes, which is really frustrating and annoying. But in some ways, I think it's been kind of useful, or not useful, but it's led to a lot more mistakes that were useful mistakes. That I think that if I didn't make any mistakes at all, I wouldn't have actually found a lot of things that were very important to my project, which is really cool because I was like, wait a minute, that could be fixing something, or like that could be something that's actually impacting the brain or something. Like, oh, maybe this bias thing is actually a useful situation, you know? So I think it's been funny how my mistakes, like I'm just completely like going through this blind, and then I'm just like, oh, okay, like here we go, you know. I don't know. It's been kind of tough, but anyways, you would think that it would mess even with less neurons firing, the higher acetylcholine amounts pass it managed to pass that threshold in a way that was very similar to how acetylcholine works in the brain. This is my current mystery. I think there's so much good intuition that comes from people that actually like don't have the level of depth of knowledge, you know? It's funny because in medicine, I think particularly in medicine, doctors very often I think look down on people that come in with their own like ailments and their own illnesses, and they're just like, you know, doctors like, oh, they're experts and they kind of know everything already, where people who don't really know what's the ins and outs of their own body come in all the time with like, I think this is off, like something feels weird, I don't know how to pinpoint it, but like this just isn't right, or I feel like this is like an issue. And I think that a lot of times, you know, when I think people discredit people that don't have that kind of mastery or whatever over the subject, where it's like sometimes you just feel it, or like sometimes I think sometimes people just don't it's like they don't have that level of like writing away in their brain. That's why kids are always saying the smartest stuff. Like kids always ask the best questions, you know? Kids don't know anything. So they'll just ask these questions. It's like, you know what? I've actually never thought about that before. I have no idea. You know what I mean? Or like I think sometimes people just have this interesting insight when they actually don't know what they're even doing, where it's like you ask these questions that it's like, you know, it actually is neuroscience that your brain after a while, like it makes these really solid kind of predictive models and things that it's just going to lean on all the time because most of the time that's right. Where sometimes I think people that already have those really intact models of what is right and what's wrong, they kind of glaze over things because that's how our brains are made. Like our brains are made to glaze over things after a while because it saves resources in your brain. So you're like, okay, life is roughly like this. And people get older, like that's why older people are always looking to younger people and thinking their political ideas are just so like that's just too far, that's too much, that's too radical. Oh, that's so weird that they think this, right? Because over time your brain gets less plastic, right? You kind of it cement this idea of what the world is or what your subject is or whatever, that you don't have that same kind of flexibility to look at a subject and actually do that, ask those kinds of questions. um and that's not, it's like that's just how your brain is meant to work. And so that's why it's really interesting sometimes when people come in with no experience of something or they just have never dealt with it before and then they just ask you these crazy interesting questions. Like I've mentioned this a few times, but this is like one of my favorite anecdotes about my little sister. But my little sister was younger, she went into Bible school. We'd go to like church when we were younger, and she asked in Bible school like, who is God's mom? And the Sunday school teacher dropped her off after, was like, she asked so many questions today. And my sister asked a lot of questions when she was younger. And she was like, she asked us who God's mom is. And it's like, how do you answer that question, right? It's like I feel like when you just have already kind of accepted something for a very long time, you just don't ask those kinds of questions that it's like, oh well, that's obvious. Well, God doesn't really have a mom because this and this and that. Where it's like, I don't know how to answer that question actually. It's like it's interesting, but anyways, I kind of might stop for a minute. I always, when I'm learning, like intense learning like this, I don't learn for like a very long time. I'll learn for a bit, I'll let it sink in, I walk around and just go about my day, and then I come back. I always come back fresher. That's why I don't like, I hate, like, I don't recommend to anybody to learn anything for more than like a little while, you know? Even this, like I took like a week off. It's better to take a break. Like I took a week and a half off this project, and you see how it just kind of like spewed out like the learning. Whereas sometimes you're just going hard at it like day in, day out, and it's like it doesn't, you just don't get that freshness. So I think it's better to just work in short chunks. So I've been working maybe like an hour, let's see. Like an hour. I'm a little frumpy right now, but I've been working like an hour. So I think an hour is, let's stop sharing. I think an hour is good for now. So yeah, I think I'm gonna go for a walk. Also, I was gonna say last thing is that I came at this. My undergrad was in comparative literature and societies, which is actually completely unrelated to neuroscience at all. And I was like, how am I gonna be a neuroscientist? But I will say that I think that because like I actually think coming from my own little different background, like I think different. I don't think like a typical STEM person right off the bat. And I don't know, I think that actually helped me a little bit. I'll reflect on how on my walk and then I'll come back, but let me like go get cuter. I look really bad right now.
All right, editing a few days later, and then I realized I forgot to answer this question, and I forgot I even asked it because days passed between like one and the other. So I thought I would just answer it because I had to sit there and reflect, like, how did it help me? But I'm sure it did. I was a comparative literature and society student. So we basically, like, that's a mouthful of a major that nobody ever knew what that was. When I told them, they're like, what is that? And what are you going to do with that? And I was like, don't ask me. I barely know myself. Just kidding. But I was like, it's actually a really random major. Like, it's like everything, actually. But basically, you apply your second year. You have to know two languages. Like, you have to show that you're fluent in two languages that are not English, and that you have some kind of interest of something that you want to explore. I went in wanting to explore Brazilian music and like all this different stuff. But anyways, so you basically are just reading, like, you have such flexibility in terms of the classes that you can take. It's really crazy. But and then you have some classes that are kind of like shared, and you're basically just doing these big comparative analyses of like cultural elements. Like, I don't even know how to I know what it is and I don't even know how to say it. Our senior year, we actually had to take a class on what comparative literature is, if that shows you anything, but comparative literature and societies. So we were doing like we had to read a bunch of texts, and then we also had to like compare cross culturally different things. So that's why I ended up writing my senior thesis on dissociative disorders, but kind of from a cultural perspective. And then I was like kind of a weird transition for me because I was like, wait, I think I actually want to talk more about like technical things. And I did like comparative literature, but I was like, I think my brain started leaning like more technical at that point, and it was like very awkward fit. But anyways, but I actually think that this particular issue, which was dissociative amnesia, there was such a strong social component to it, like a cultural, like there were so many questions of culture, of society, and of how we like it was a very political science problem. And I think that actually going into comparative, like going into dissociative amnesia required an ability to think politically as well and to position an issue in psychology within the realm of like a cultural sphere because there was so much at play. There was like misogyny, Freud, and like the Oedipus complex and all of that. There was like abuse and how we deal with abuse as a society. There was a lot. I think that there's actually a big political component to it. And I think that that's why there was a stigma in science because I don't think that every STEM person is taught to think like that. And I think that trauma science in particular is very connected to how we think about each other. So I think that actually having that viewpoint helped me to see cut through the reason why there was a stigma in the first place because I could position it within like a cultural sphere. So that's my answer to my own question that I didn't answer at first, but I do think that that gave me my a perspective on dissociative amnesia, also being a survivor and like having navigated that myself. But I think that that was like the angle that needed to be had to actually get to the issue at all.
Oh, I'm back, and I have a really bad cold if you can't tell from my face, and I just feel really unwell today, but I have to keep going. Oh my gosh, I actually do look so like ugh. But I want to keep working. You know why? Because I'm going to Brazil to visit my mom in like 2 weeks, and it would be so nice to have the experiments like good and up and running, and then I can just get the numbers and everything and start writing the results section when I'm in Brazil instead of having to be like troubleshooting and everything would be really, really nice. So I'm going to do that today. I'm going to keep working. I want to just look at my thing that I did. So, what we learned last time is that the bias being bigger is making this number being bigger means that the signal needs to be at this level to turn on the other neurons around. And how high that signal is determined here at H. I'm gonna write this down. So okay, so my low colon, where I did see that effect, sometimes that meant that neurons were turned off, and sometimes that resulted in random neurons that weren't on anywhere else being turned on. I understand why they would be turned off. Makes sense, right? Because I guess the threshold wasn't reached. Turned on is kind of the interesting one. Why are there random ones being turned on? I think that has something to do with like the weights from what I read, but I'm not understanding yet. Just wanted to see where sparsity was being used. Normal pattern is making a pattern in a random number below the sparsity amount, it seems like. And so is dummy patterns. Okay, so the sparsity is used in weights as well. I want to understand. I know that this was added because it like made it like balanced or something. I'm so drained recently. Like I don't want to do anything. I'm so tired. But I just really want this thing to be done. You know, one reason I think I was also having issues when I tried to just change the sparsity is that I didn't change it down here too, and it needs to be changed down here. So I think that's why I was getting issues. So I might try it again in a second and change the sparsity level. And so I'm just asking, sparsity is in the weight section too. Can you explain its purpose? Sometimes I just step back and I'm like, why am I here? Like, why am I doing this? I don't have to do this. I do now, but I don't have to do this at all. I just want to go back to my hometown so bad. I've been missing home a lot. Okay, I'm gonna try. This is like not related to my learning, but since I noticed that I messed that up, I'm gonna try doing the sparsity, like just changing the sparsity amount again, but actually fixing here. Like, I messed up because this should be one. At one, everything should be normal. Sometimes I would look back at like there are certain situations in life that I'd look back and I'm like, why am I so annoyingly consistent or persistent or whatever? Like I don't know. I was like, it's not a good thing. Right now, it is a good thing because it's like if I wasn't like annoyingly consistent, I would give up right now because this is so annoying and I'm so done. I just like don't want to do anything else on it, but like a freaking cockroach. So now just at like max acetylcholine with the sparsity at 0.1. I'm just gonna check that this has actually worked. Okay, so it did look like it recovered what it encoded. And is this the same as this? It is. So everything is fine at 0.1, which I was having issues with the other one before, so that's good. And then now I'm gonna make the acetylcholine like 0.6. At 0.6 in the other one, it was working just the same as normal. Like it could recover everything normally. So I'm gonna try that. First of all, the closest encoded is the same as normal encoded, which is good. And then recovered, it did exactly it did exactly recover the encoded. So it's good still. Now I'm gonna see like 0.3. By 0.3, I should be seeing some issues. If it's the same, if I'm having the issue. If not, I don't know. This is the place where I'm learning right now, so I can see if I can see the same effect because this is the thing that got like wiped out. This is at 0.3, so recovered. Let's compare it to what was encoded. No, I guess it did everything perfectly. Like this is 0.1. It seems like everything is still perfectly fine, and I'm not seeing any issues. All right. Well, that's information. So I guess what I would write in my paper is that when the bias is like, I don't know, checked, make sure the sparsity is like, I guess, relative. I'm not going to write it like this, but this is what I'm seeing. This is where I think I want to do some research. So what we should try to do next, I think, is figure out why. So why was that happening at, okay, so at 0.5, the threshold was too big. So why does that mean? Okay, that's the question right there. So the other question I had is what is like what is a bias in like a normal brain? What's the biological equivalent? This is a thing that I was like, maybe your brain just gets bad at this. You know? Um, this is I guess what I'm finding, right? Paradoxical hyperexcitability, thresholds drop, network becomes noisy, contributes to false memories and confusion. Okay, I'm starved. I'm starving, so I'm gonna come back to this. Alright, I'm back with chili that I made the other day, and I was thinking this over the microwave. Previously, I thought that I would have to do like ones with different sparsity amounts. What I actually need to do, and let's change this back to 0.2, is I need to run the same one with 0.2, but what I'll do is that I'll change the bias. So instead of having it by times 8a, I'll probably do like 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, 0. Whatever, like a range and show like how that effect gets worse when it gets harder to like cross the threshold. I'll probably do some research on this stuff too. Really quick, I'm gonna start to try to find some papers. These are things that might happen on my Brazil trip. Like I might be reading. I'm just gonna look up like in trauma. I don't know. It seems more linked with epilepsy. This isn't even something I truly have to worry about for my paper. I just thought I would like, since I saw it, it's like I might as well bring it up, because it's not really like as relevant anyways, but I just thought I'd like make a little mention, and it then wouldn't hurt to bring like to make that graph because I don't know actually. Yeah, I just think like it doesn't hurt to mention it. I don't know how much of what I have is gonna get kept. And then if I'll cut some stuff. One good reason why it would be good to mention this is in the future research like section, I can talk about chronic stress because chronic stress can, I don't know, also lowers acetylcholine as well. Or it doesn't lower acetylcholine, it makes it harder to produce acetylcholine. So I could say, future research, this and this and that. At the very least, I think this is going to be kind of novel in terms of like, I don't know, maybe this is like people know it, but it hasn't been like, it's like, I don't know, maybe there's a computational model of it, but I haven't seen a computational model that's looking at acetylcholine in like the ranges to this degree, you know what I'm saying? Like what happens with acetylcholine at different levels. I think like I haven't seen that paper. So I think because I haven't seen that paper and like I have the little like I don't know, it's cool because I'm seeing like the full range of effects for acetylcholine. So I think that will be interesting and I just want to make sure that I reap the most benefit. You see, I'm doing the opposite of epilepsy where my threshold is I think too high. Right? Or am I insane? But I could like I'm really curious now. Like let's just play around with it a little bit just so I can see the effect that I think I'm going to see. If I put it at like let's say I put this okay, the sparsity is at 0.2. Acetylcholine, let's put it at like 0.3. So no, let's put it at 1.0. No, I'm torn. Let me put the acetylcholine at like 0.3, but make the threshold like really low for the bias. Like where's the bias now? Let me put the threshold at like 0.1. So it's below the sparsity amount now. No, that does the opposite. It doesn't really it doesn't hurt anything. So or wait, let's check this one. Just out of curiosity, I don't know if I would like that will do anything at all. I think it just made it too easy. Like now it's gonna be perfect. Yeah, it did recover everything fine. So I guess that's not gonna really make an impact to make it go lower, which I can show in my model too. I think now my model, it's like it's good, it's fixed. I understand why things are happening, how they're happening. Like I don't feel like I need to like okay, I understand it now. I'm probably gonna keep learning so I can explain things better, but I see why that occurred. So the only thing that's changing now is like the bias. If I put it at like 0. Like let's put it like 0.4, which is a little bit higher. Let's see what happens. And this is at acetylcholine 0.3. It seems kind of fine. Acetylcholine is at 0.3. Yeah. So I guess let's try it again at 0.5. That's the place that let's do this one. The sparsity, everything 0.4. Acetylcholine at 0.1. I mean acetylcholine at 0.1. Even there it seems fine from what I'm seeing. Let me see those. Sometimes okay, yeah, like this one I don't know. Sometimes like one pattern is fine, but another is not. Even that is seeming like completely fine. So there was no issue even there. Where I was starting to get issues with 0.5, I think. So let me try it again and see if I still get that effect. I feel like these are fun. Like this model, it feels almost like an instrument. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's like an instrument that I'm playing right now, and it just feels nice. I really like it because it's like now you're playing with it, and it's nice. Okay, so now you see an issue. Now I think there is an issue now. Or am I wrong? Now I'm getting memory loss. And you see memory loss here. Like it didn't remember here. It didn't hallucinate though this time around. Which I think also there's gonna be a little bit of like some randomness to it. Let's see this one that had so many iterations. Because I think this one does have hallucinations. See, so some patterns do, some patterns don't. Here you do see memory loss. The memory is gone. And then sometimes you see like numbers that aren't supposed to be there. But let me double check that that's true because it could just be copying the noisy pattern and I just don't know it, you know? So let me get the noisy pattern in here and see if it's just taking from the noisy pattern. But I see that there's places that it's not. Like I can already see that here it hallucinated. So here it just took a random one that wasn't, oh wait, no, that's a noisy input. So it did take a random one here that wasn't anywhere else. It didn't take this one. And then, yeah, so you can see that it is hallucinating and stuff at that level. Here it took a bunch of ones that just weren't even there. So that obviously is the issue. Is that when the bias threshold is too high compared to the sparsity, you start to get like memory loss and hallucinations, but at like a only at low acetylcholine though. At high, it's still fine. And then that starts at like I should be writing this in my results section already, honestly, because this is just gonna I have a pretty strong feel. I mean, obviously I think this is gonna hold up. So let's and then what I think will be interesting is if I raise it up like one more and see if you start to see that impact at like even less acetylcholine, which you should probably. Like if I make it 0.6, you probably will see the same effect and probably like it'll start with like it'll take like less time to get there. So here the effect starts at like 0.3, but maybe in the next one it could start at like 0.4, you know, like something like that. I'm gonna put it back to 0.4. Wait, the thing I was gonna write, which I'll just copy paste, starts at around 0.5, but the model is like forgiving up to a certain threshold. That's what I found really interesting about all of these different things is that like there's a sort of like there's room for error. So here we have my paper, which is extremely long. Okay, I feel really good about now I can go back and get numbers again from this model. I need to fix up all of my metrics because they were a little bit wonky. So I really want to get this published like over time. I've mentioned that's my goal. And it's kind of crazy to think that people could actually use this and like actually do stuff with it, you know, like actually change somebody's situation because of like my random research that I did in my room is insane to think about. So I was gonna go back to 0.4. So I didn't see any issues in what was recovered here. Sometimes it like one pattern is fine, but another is not. So I'm gonna try this one out. I think I might be seeing an issue in this one, but actually no, I think it's fine, but let me just check just in case. This is what was recovered. This is what was encoded. You see, it's perfectly fine. Like, there's no issue even at the lowest acetylcholine amount up until you get to 0.5. And then at 0.5, there's issues. And those issues look like low acetylcholine. The thing that I've been trying to remind myself too is like, I don't have to explain everything. Like, I'd never read a research paper where they didn't say like, there's gonna be places where like you don't really know why that's happening per se, or like I don't know all the answers, but like somebody else might. So it doesn't really matter that like I can't explain like every single thing, like that. I think that's fine. Like I don't really know why, like what exactly like is it that a brain typically would be able to modulate for some low acetylcholine, but in some situations, these are like I'm gonna start writing in my discussions like just some potential like things I could talk about. I don't know where this is going, to be honest. Uh, a lot of this will probably get cut. I don't know what I'm even going to talk about like fully in my discussion section. I've just been writing my thoughts, but like for example, like I only even though like that effect is normal for low ACH and it is adjacent to a lot of different disorders connected to low acetylcholine. I don't know, like, so obviously, like, this is a thing is that at low ACH, no matter what, you do get like noise. So you do get like a mix of the old and new memories. So that's always occurring. But sometimes, but if the bias threshold is too high, you also get hallucinations and memory loss at low acetylcholine after like a buffer, after a buffer of thresholds that have no issue, that create no issue. So that could be for different things. So it could be like this is what I'm trying to say is like the like brains adjust the threshold. So it could be like I'm gonna do the research. I don't know which of these things like I'm gonna try to read just so I can mention these in passing, but it could be something to do with like neuromodulation. It could have something to do this one, homeostatic plasticity. So basically, I was thinking plasticity. I was like, I was saying this in another video. I said this in one of my Substack reflections, and I was like, I don't know how to phrase it, but I was like, maybe you just don't get your over time, you're not as good at like fixing the threshold that well for inhibitory tone. I'm gonna read all this. So it could have something to do with like just like I don't know, like biological differences maybe as well. Like maybe some people just like I don't even know, like they're not as good at modulating. I don't know. That threshold. Just naturally, like that could just be like a genetic difference that impacts how their brains react to low acetylcholine. This is the other thing is that there are a lot of people, there are people that have like psychosis like experiences in passing, but they don't actually develop psychosis. Like this is something I might mention, I might not. And so like they kind of just like it just passes. And it could be that like maybe some people are better at kind of like, maybe for some people they, this is a, I might not include this, but like maybe they're better at modulating when the acetylcholine gets low, where it's just like a passing effect. I don't know about that one, but maybe. And then the other thing, like our brains, I mean, have to hit low ACH at some point. And so obviously not it's not always going to result in hallucinations and stuff. Like everybody is going to pass that threshold, you know. So it's not like innately bad or like pathological. So the pathological element probably has to do more with your ability to actually like modulate the thresholds in response to the low acetylcholine versus just the low acetylcholine being the issue. Um, so I think that's what I'm gonna write about for this. Like that's probably gonna be my discussion on that impact, like that effect. Because everybody has to have low acetylcholine at some point. Like obviously to get to the lower amount, to get to recurrent excitation, like you do have to have low acetylcholine at some point. Like it's not like everybody is gonna hallucinate because that's going down. Like it's gonna go down. It doesn't always necessarily cause hallucinations or memory loss. It's just a problem, I guess, if that's chronically down, and then other stuff probably in conjunction with it as well is my like elementary like beginning thought process that I could. There's always more reading to do. I'm always like, if I just read more papers, I feel like I could even explain this better. But I think that's already a pretty good start, and that's probably just how I'm going to discuss it. And then that kind of narrowed it down and just made it easier for me. So the only thing that's probably left to do for that one now is that I'm going to run it again, get the numbers again. And then there's going to be like one experiment where the acetylcholine is like just like totally normal, like normal, that bias rule with the like stuff times A. But then I'm going to run a second experiment with this one where I'm like, oh, I mean, for this one, it should be the sparsity is normal. And then for this second experiment, the sparsity is going to be kind of like, no, the sparsity is going to be fine. It's actually what is going to be happening is the bias threshold is going to go up. And like, I'll run probably like 1.0 to like, should I just do 0 to 10 actually at this point? Like, not 0 to 10, like, yeah, is that right? No, 0 to 1 doesn't hurt. Yeah, it doesn't hurt. And then I can show that. Like, I can make one of these little guys. And I think that will be good. And that's good because then I figured out, like, why is this happening? Like, exactly in, like, term, in the proper terminology. And we pinpointed the issue. And yeah, I think that's everything. Oh, wait, let me put this in my method section, actually. It's nice because I think that actually this is the point where I'm like feeling good about like the other sacrifices that I made for this project because I feel really proud of it and I'm starting to feel like it's going to be really useful. And this is really good information across the board for like all sorts of different disorders. It's nice because I think that even though I'm trying to come, like, I'm going for dissociative amnesia, obviously that was my goal, but I feel like I got so much more out of it because I am seeing so many different ranges of acetylcholine effects. And it's like, it's simple, you know, it's simple, but it's like, I'm just seeing like what's happening across different ranges. And I think that it's really interesting to get that information. And I just think it would be like applicable in so many circumstances and just like universally useful for so many different types of disorders that also have so many memory related disorders actually like have some kind of relationship to acetylcholine, either it's too low or whatever. So I think it's good to get that information anyways. Like that's just good info across the board. So I feel pretty good about that, and I just feel like I'm getting a lot of use out of a very simple structure, which is cool. Like it's just the pattern separation, the dense code, and the recurrent excitation, and that's already showing me so much. All right. I feel pretty good about the work that I've done over the last like I only did 2 work sessions, but it was like 3 days. I look very messy right now. I'm like you can see my bed. I got like tissues here and stuff. Like I'm very like congested. I'm not feeling the best at all, but I'm happy because I feel much stronger about where because I feel much stronger about like my project, how I'm coming at it, and like my ability to explain different aspects of it. So yeah, okay, so I'm gonna go now and try to do something to make my cold go away and also just do my normal regular job. But okay, I'm hype. I feel better.